one voice for Niagara. News Talk 610 CKTV.
Afton Elaine Burton, she's 26, says she's in love with 80-year-old convicted serial killer Charles Manson. About 9 years ago, she moved to Corcoran, California, near the site of the prison he's in. Kings County issued a marriage license for the two, and that made news. It depended on the prison, really. Were they going to get permission to go ahead with the nuptials? That permission has been granted. Strange story in some ways. Our guest is an American journalist, novelist. Articles have appeared in Newsweek, New York Daily News, Deadspin, The Daily Beast, others, and he has spent some time in prison. He is Daniel Genis, who joins us now. Hello, Daniel.
Good evening. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks for joining us today. This is not completely unheard of, but it's unusual. Would you agree?
Well, I've seen it many a time and in many different forms, and I have also preserved my own marriage through incarceration. So, yes.
You got married while you were in prison?
I did not. I got married the year before I went to prison.
Oh, my goodness.
But my sentence was 10 years. So I remained married throughout the whole decade.
What did you go to prison for?
Well, I had a very bad 2 years in my life when I was addicted to heroin. It took me right off my publishing career track, and it didn't matter that I had just completed university. 2 years of heroin addiction brought me down to the desperation of having to commit a couple of robberies.
But you had, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you had someone who knew you, felt they could see you through this thing and stayed by you.
Right.
The Charles Manson thing's a little different. Somebody spots someone of infamy and says, I love them and I want to be with them. That's crazy.
Now, during my 10 years, I've served as a best man to people getting married, and I've seen non-celebrities. However, the prison I was in also did have a Charles Manson-type figure. If you've ever heard of the Amityville Horror, Ronnie DeFeo.
Yes.
I spent 4 years in the prison with him, and when I was there, he was on his third wife. From what I hear, there's a fourth wife now. So I have also seen what happens these celebrity marriages. It usually starts with fan mail. Guys like that, like Charles Manson, like Ryan DeFeo, also Michael Alec, Party Monster. I did time with him too. They get stacks and stacks of fan mail. And the women who marry people who have committed heinous, notorious, vile crimes, they're marrying them because they've committed heinous, notorious crimes. It's a participation in mental illness, really.
Well, I agree with you there. I'm glad you went in that direction because it doesn't seem like somebody's, pardon the expression, quite all there if this is their goal, to marry a Charles Manson.
No. From what I understand, Charles Manson, who is an ignorant person, he was an ex-con even when he was free. What he does is basically prey on the most damaged members of society. And I'm guessing this girl is not well. So she's going to share in his mental delusions. Now, I believe California does have a system for conjugal visits, but you know what that means, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went on conjugal visits, that meant 44 hours together with my wife in privacy. It was very nice. But I highly doubt that they will ever allow Charles Manson in a room with a person unsupervised.
I had read that Manson is not allowed any family visits because he is a person with no scheduled time for parole, and therefore conjugal visits are not allowed. So there's not even going to be that. There's no consummation of this marriage.
Yes, well, that makes sense. I know that when Ronnie DeFeo first applied for conjugal visits long ago, he was denied, and he actually had to go to court in order to be allowed to win the right to go on conjugal visits.
So,
but what you know, this is only a tiny minority, though, of the kind of marriages that happen. Most marriages between prisoners and free women are not with anybody famous.
So can it be a marriage of love? Can there be actually something there?
Well, I have seen those, but I've also seen the ugly side of it, because prisoners often have ulterior motives in marrying women, and they manipulate women. They use women. And having been inside and seen I've seen their real faces, I know what goes on. And the women don't. The women get nice cards, and they get poems, and they get beautifully written letters. So they're drawn into the romantic fantasy, but they're actually being used for money, for packages. And once the man is released, these relationships rarely survive.
Now, you said money and all of that. Why do they need that in prison? Is there a prison economy?
Absolutely. It costs a lot of money to be in prison. I'll tell you this. I spent my 10 years on $100 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was enough for me to go to commissary and buy food. And, in fact, that was enough money to put me in the 1%. I was fairly wealthy at that point, because there is a pay. You get a state pay, but it's only $1 or $2. So, yes, of course. And you can buy other things in prison. I mean, if you really want, you can buy drugs in prison. They're expensive, but you can buy them. So, yes, you do need money to go to prison. And guys like to go on visits. They like to have somebody writing them letters and so forth. So there's a lot of these manipulating inmates, convicts. They're con men. And what they do is make it hard on the minority of people who actually do fall in love and have a romantic marriage. A friend of mine recently married a woman about a year ago, and now he's getting out. He's going to go live with her, and they love each other. I mean, it helps that they both have their own resources. He used to be an accountant until he got a little greedy,
mm-hmm.
to the tune of a couple $1 million.
Wow!
But yeah, he's a white collar criminal, and he met a woman who was a friend's neighbor, and they love each other. They're profiled in my Washington Post story, and she can't wait for his release. So, an example like that is why you can't just ban prisoner marriages. But a lot of people who work in the field, like the counselors, for example,
mm-hmm.
they from the conversations I've had, they wish that prisoners were actually not allowed to marry, because they've witnessed so many unpleasant things happen.
Daniel, I can only imagine. Fascinating, but we're so quickly out of time. I'm on your website here, and many of your articles featured on your website as well?
Yes, sir. There is DanielGenis.net. That's where you can find my articles. You can find interviews with me. You can find video. You can find photographs. And I also have a book deal with Penguin for a memoir that should come out next year, 1046. And on top of that, in this week's issue of Newsweek, there's a feature on Thanksgiving in prison. It's written by me, and it actually went up online 2 hours ago.
All right.
So
it's Daniel. It's great. No, Daniel Genis, Genis, DanielGenis.net, and this will be a good excuse for us to have you on again when your book comes out. Please come back and talk to us soon. Thank you, Daniel.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot for having me.
Daniel Genis, writer, journalist, novelist, and former prisoner, talking about marriages in prison. Charles Manson and 26-year-old Star Burton have the go-ahead from the prison, and they have a license to tie the knot, and they will soon.
Miracles will happen as we dream. We're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy.
And now, your host, Larry Fedoric, on the One Voice for Niagara, News Talk 610 CKTV.
Afton Elaine Burton, she's 26, says she's in love with 80-year-old convicted serial killer Charles Manson. About 9 years ago, she moved to Corcoran, California, near the site of the prison.